up Tuesday, we'll react to all the playoff action. Plus, what should we expect Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, and the Knicks to do in Game 5? It's on Sportsmanlike, 6 a.m. Eastern, right here on ESPN Radio, ESPN2, and ESPNU.
1430 ESPN is giving you the best seat in the house. The athletes, the stories, the action that loyal fans want to get inside the game. Whether it's high school, college, or the superstars you know today, Phil Bonatti is taking you behind the bench to give you the best perspective of sports in the Central Valley.
It's Phil Bonatti. Behind the Bench returns Monday with a full NFL draft recap, plus Ethan Holiday joins the show. Brought to you by Helena Agri.
Listen to Behind the Bench with Phil Bonatti every day from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Introducing The Sidebar, a brand new open-air beer garden at Me and Ed's Coney Island Grill in River Park. Experience a new way to catch a game, hang with friends, and enjoy new appetizers, char-grilled burgers, salads, wings with over 10 house-made sauces, and of course, world-famous Me and Ed's Pizza. Thirsty? Try our self-poured taps with over a dozen craft beers, wines, ciders, and craft seltzers. Plus a full bar with an impressive selection of tequilas, whiskeys, and craft cocktails. The Sidebar at Me and Ed's Coney Island Grill, now open in River Park.
Okay, you're the efficiency consultant. Lay it on me. How are we going to save my business some money?
Your company's retirement plan.
What now?
Do you have any idea what you're paying your HR staff just to manage your retirement plan? Enrollments, regulations, documenting salary and deferral changes, distributions, and the list goes on. They can spend hours dealing with your provider every time an employee has a question or request.
I don't even want to calculate what I'm spending on that.
I already did. Here's the number.
I think I'm going to be sick. But who else is going to do all that?
401k specialists. Their team will do that all for you and way more cost effectively. And they're powered by Thiessen-Duker Modern Wealth Management, so you'll be getting great investment advice too.
Well, that's a big no-brainer. How do I make this happen?
Just visit Thiessen-Duker.com to learn more. Then give 401k specialists a call. And I think I just paid for my invoice, which is right here, by the way. The advisors of Thiessen-Duker Modern Wealth Management are registered representatives with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.
Precision Civil Engineering is building the Valley from the ground up. From planning and land surveying to civil engineering and construction management, they handle it all with the experience you can trust. Proud sponsors of Fresno State Athletics, Precision brings that same commitment to excellence to every project. With over 20 years of experience, they're helping shape the communities we live and work in every day. From concept to completion, it's all done with precision. Learn more at precisioneng.com. Go Dogs!
Spring and summer weddings, prom, graduation. Patrick James is your premier destination. Elegant tuxedos and suits for purchase or rental. We offer full-service tailoring on site, custom clothing offerings, and the West Coast's first Martin Dingman Lodge and Johnny O Shop and Shop. Please come in and experience the exemplary customer service and quality apparel carefully selected for you from all your favorite brands. Patrick James in Fig Garden Village or patrickjames.com. Started in Fresno and serving the Valley since 1962.
Hey guys, Phil Bonatti from Behind the Bench. Spring is here, and that means more fans on the move, more cars on the road, and unfortunately, more accidents. When the temperatures rise, so do tempers. The roads get busier and the drivers get more aggressive. So whether you're heading to the game or just getting across town, know that if the unexpected happens, you're not alone. The team at Davis and Van Wagenen has your back. They know the road, they know the law, and they fight to get what you deserve. Stay safe this spring. Call the name Fresno trusts. Davis and Van Wagenen.
Hungry for a deal? Toledo's Mexican Restaurant has you covered. From 10 to 2, Monday through Friday, your lunch plans are officially solved with Toledo's $16.99 lunch special. Pick your favorite fountain drink, plus your choice of super salad, and pair it with one of Toledo's popular traditional favorites, your choice of enchiladas, tostadas, or burrito. Just $16.99. Monday through Friday from 10 to 2. With 3 locations to serve you in Clovis and Fresno, Toledo's is the perfect place to erase your midday craving. Online at Toledo'sMexicanRestaurant.com.
Everybody, welcome to a Monday SportsLine, the Bulldog Hour. Cap Moore alongside, as always, will take you to 3, handed up to our good buddy Phil Bonatti. It's outstanding. Phil behind the bench. The full 3 hours today. The Giants and A's are both off. The A's are awaiting the Royals tomorrow in Sacramento. The Giants heading back east once again. They'll open in Philly tomorrow. I'll tell you all about schedule courtesy of Ed Dunkel and his fine business, Precision Civil Engineering, a little bit later on, scheduled for both 1430 and 790. Remind you about Ed every day. Planning, land surveying, civil engineering, landscape architecture, construction management. It's all there under one roof at Precision Civil Engineering. More information, 449-4500 or precisioneng.net. And again, when we go over the schedule for both stations, I'll tell you about the great fundraising that it has done for so many years through the Lyles College of Engineering there on campus at Fresno State. As always, unifying athletics and academics to provide more funding resources, the primary goal, and it has worked beautifully for all the students there that have gone through the Lyles College of Engineering, and many of them end up working for Ed at his terrific business, Precision Civil Engineering. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Paul with me, as always, on a Monday. Over the last 2 Mondays, Paul has not been with us because of scheduling issues. He'll be with us in just a moment. We'll talk the spring preview, his view of what happened over the weekend. We'll touch upon baseball. And, Jordan, I will get to your question about softball here up front. But first, before we get there, other lead dogs, as always, want to spend some time with you, beginning with our buddies at Lee's Air Plumbing, Heating, and Roofing. Local people, highest order. They've been around since 1981 here in the Central Valley. See the avocado green and blue trucks all over the place. I'm having to do work even during COVID. Really professional people, very timely, very competitive pricing, and all around a great group to deal with if you have any need at all. Central Air Plumbing, Heating, or Roofing, these are the people to call at 825-5337, which is 825-LEES. Or you can book your appointments on the web at leesair.com. And as we mention all the time, they also have the Lee's Air hotline, which is the number you can call to get on the air with Phil, and also the number that guests like Paul Leffler are on when they come up on the air. Paul is waiting on that line right now, and mark it down, 559-320-1430. That's how you can call Phil and get your input live over the air. As far as what we're looking at weather-wise, which is what Lee's lets me do every day, tell you about the weather. It's a beautiful week ahead. The rains are gone. The rains might be done for the year as we head to May. Sometimes we'll get late rain and snow, and this was pretty late already, but it is clear the next 7 days after maybe some rain earlier today in certain parts of the valley. But what we're looking at is a 70 today, a low of 48. The winds, I think people know, are up a little bit today. 76 tomorrow, again partly cloudy, and then we go into the 80s. Wednesday 81, 84 on Thursday, 87 on Friday, and then 86, 82 over the weekend. So a perfect forecast for the next 7 days to be out and around. The winds are going to be up around 10 miles an hour, which can clear out some of the issues. Also can bother your allergies if you're not careful. But it is a good forecast, and all the lows should be hanging right around the high 50s to 60. So, again, we are headed toward May in a big hurry, and we are headed toward big-time heat in a big hurry. But right now, pleasant temperatures, and we got a little bit more rain. And, Robert, if you're out there, no more tornadoes, so it's not my fault that I've been requesting rain. That's just for the ag guys. But anyway, thanks everybody at Lee's for allowing us the time to tell you about the weather. Again, leesair.com, 825-5337, 825-LEES. Anything you need, Central Air Plumbing, Heating, or Roofing. The final reminder from another long time and great businessman and good friend, Joe Cruz, Superior Pipe and Stainless Supply, in year number 26 of his great business at 4529 North Marty Avenue in Town Suite 103. You can always give him a call at 266-7473, which is 266-PIPE, or go to the web for more information, superiorpipeusa.com, or Gabe, who works for Joe, has a direct email, gabe.sbs@gmail.com. Pipe fittings, valves, sanitary fittings, food-grade chemical hoses, suction hoses, it's all there for you. Family-friendly business. Joe will always be available, Gabe as well, to analyze your situation right away and get you a same-day estimate, particularly for someone who's working around a valve, where you have that immediacy where if a valve goes down, your business comes crashing down. For instance, if you're a plant person, maintenance worker, tanker delivery service operator, someone who works around a valve at a dairy, for instance, around a boiler service, anybody who has a valve that is front and center to their business, if it starts to go down, your business can go down with it, and you can take that catastrophic hit in your bottom line. What Joe can do is give you a same-day estimate, get started right away. If it's a minor issue, they'll get it solved in a big hurry. If it's a major issue already, they'll make sure they can give you the game plan right away and get you back up and running as quickly as possible. And as we've said, if you have a few minutes after Joe is done helping out the situation to make sure your business stays up and running efficiently, he'd like to tell you what he has done as a benefactor at Fresno State for over 3 decades. And we'll tell you right now, the best avenue is to head to the main website at gobulldogs.com. There is a donate link at the top. You can't miss it. Click on it, take you to different areas of potential donation. BulldogFoundation.org has a link. Club Red, which is for former student athletes, that's right there under that header. The major giving societies have their links, the Green Bee Society, the Myers Champion Circle. Then under Ways to Give, you have the explanation for methods of support. You have Valley Co-op there, which is the critically important matching funds entity. Valley Fueled is there, and then the sports clubs where your money goes directly to the sport you choose. For instance, Quarterback Club for football, Timeout Club for men's basketball. Jack Furtick with me on Wednesdays to talk basketball. Board of directors of the Timeout Club. He said they'd love to have more members. He also said call him anytime you'd like, 559-287-3305. That's his cell, or hit him up at his email, furtickjack@AOL.com for more information. It doesn't cost that much, and it's a great business avenue for you, and also really good to connect with other supporters just from a social standpoint. There are also other links there for other men's and women's sports, for instance, Dugout Club for baseball. And then finally, there is one other link there, and that is simply the word more, and that'll tell you about tickets and parking, all events on campus, and everything going on. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping center for you around Bulldog athletics, and particularly important to try to help out from a grassroots standpoint the fundraising that is going to be requisite to keep up with the Joneses, never mind across the country, but in our own conference itself as we move to the PAC in just a couple of months. And speaking of a couple of months away, of course, our partnership with Fresno State through Bulldog Sports Enterprises, Chris and everybody at the station, working with Saul and Garrett, that gets started on the 1st of July. And at that point, anything you are giving toward the station in regard to Fresno State will also benefit Fresno State. That's why this is the first ever local partnership of this kind between the university and a locally owned entity like this radio station and Chris Pacheco's holdings. So it's really important, and it's something that we look forward to as we become the flagship once again of Fresno State beginning on the 1st of July. Anyway, thanks to Joe Cruz, everybody at Superior Pipe and Stainless Supply, allowing me the time to tell you about how to donate to Fresno State. Thanks to our buddies at Lee's Air Plumbing, Heating, and Roofing, affording me the time to talk about the weather. And as always, thanks to Ed Dunkel and his outstanding business, Precision Civil Engineering. I'll tell you more about our schedules, courtesy of Ed, a little bit later on in the broadcast, and also will tell you once again the great fundraising work that Ed does for his alma mater, Fresno State, and for the Valley itself. All that having been said, let's bring Paul up right now for our usual Monday visit with the Voice of Your Bulldogs. Paul, how you doing?
Tony, doing great. Just came from downtown at City Hall, and the mayor's kicking off a real great initiative. Of course, this is 2026, the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. Just came back from the honor flight last week. Thanks to everybody who came out and supported our best. Another packed crowd at the welcome home. There are going to be so many events between now and the end of the year celebrating 250 years of America. So the mayor just unveiled this new campaign for One America, One Fresno. And it's going to be a chance from between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, you're going to see the city look a whole lot different. I'm sure that it's going to come into play with a lot of the sporting events that we talked about. In fact, the Fresno Grizzlies are part of this initiative too. Fresno State's going to be involved. There's going to be a lot of neat ways for us to come together and say, hey, despite the flaws and the challenges, we live in a special place. America's a special place. Fresno and the Valley are a special place. And so I'm excited. That was a great start to what hopefully is going to be a great rest of the year.
again, the time between Memorial Day and Labor Day is so critically important because a lot of people have a little bit of time away from work. Kids are out of school, and there is an opportunity to take a bigger worldview of a lot of things that sometimes it's tough to do, as you know, during the 9 months of the academic year. So we look forward to it. And Jerry, who's a terrific guy, has done a wonderful job as mayor and doing everything he can to unite this city and this valley, which, of course, he is a native son of. Now, well, before we get to other things at Fresno State, I want to address Jordan's question about the softball team. I do not know if it's Jordan a male or Jordan a female. It doesn't make any difference. But Jordan, if you're out there, next time specify it. I'll be able to be more specific. But you asked how important was the win yesterday for the softball team in Reno, which, by the way, is where the conference tournament is going to be in a little over a week. It was absolutely critically important because this softball team had suffered crushing walk-off defeat losses in Albuquerque and in Reno in just ways you just can't imagine, being 1 out away, 1 strike away, and having walk-off homers. And yesterday they were able to respond after a lead got away, held their composure, and won a game that had they not won, to answer your question, Jordan, they would have been in a position, given the fact that Boise State finishes at home against San Jose State, who was in the bottom of the standings, and Boise State owns the tiebreak over Fresno State. The very likely occurrence would have been, had the Bulldogs lost that game yesterday, they would have had to have swept San Diego State in this final series, which is coming up Thursday to Saturday, the final regular season series at Marjorie Wright Diamond. They would have had to have won all 3. Now, if they can get 2 or 3, they will be fine, and they will be in that top 6 no matter what happens with the New Mexico series against Utah State, and no matter what happens between Boise State and San Jose State. Further, if for some reason San Jose State were to show up big, the Bulldogs with 1 win could get away with not having to worry about anything else, but that is something they can't count on. What they control right now is by winning 2 or 3 against San Diego State, they control their ability to get in. So it was critically important yesterday, and they were able to get the win, and now we'll see what happens Thursday through Saturday at home, and what happens up in Boise with San Jose State, and what happens in Albuquerque with Utah State there. But the Bulldogs control their own destiny. We'll see how it plays out. I plan to talk to Matt Norville on Thursday. Hopefully Matt will have a little bit of time for me in the 2 o'clock hour before that 6 o'clock first pitch. I wanted to get that one out of the way. Paul, before you and I talk baseball, and you already know my point of view about this, and I'm not going to belabor it. I said it a couple of weeks ago, and you and I will address your feelings right now about it. But I did want to ask you about the spring preview and the fact that Brandon Ramirez is on crutches right now. Is that the biggest worry and takeaway you took from spring preview?
Yeah, I feel really bad for Brandon. Obviously, he made a huge difference last year and was ready to do so again this year, but there is some depth at that position. And we've seen it in the past where guys who suffered really, disappointing and in some cases devastating injuries were able to come back, and the timing worked out well. So Brandon's one of those guys whose faith is at the core of his life. He's in chapel every week during the season, really trusts God and God's plan, and he's going to trust God's timing. So he seemed to be encouraged when I talked to him on the sideline the other day. And I know the coaches are encouraged to see what Julius Gillett can do. So fans saw a little wrinkle of him in the bowl game, but they're going to see more of him this fall. And he's a guy who, you can't pigeonhole him. You can't put him in say he's this guy or that guy. He's really unique, and he runs with passion. He plays with, I wouldn't say reckless abandon. It's under control, but with a lot of fire. And you throw that in the mix with what's already there, with Speedy Luke, who's a game changer. I think Donaldson can have a bounce-back year and show more of the promise as he gets more comfortable in this system. And obviously they brought in the transfer in Tariq as well. So that room's plenty deep, and probably more exciting about the Bulldog run game is the fact that the O-line should be really solid. Having Roland Fullwood for an extra year, having Braden Walton back even taller and stronger, and having a better feel for what it takes to have that unit coached up by Brian Ferentz, who's coached that position playing at the highest levels of football in the NFL, the O-line is going to set the tone for this offense this year. I think we are going to see more explosive ability in the passing game. Mandel and Martin are pushing each other well. They're both tremendous young men who I think can help this team win. And we'll see some receivers emerge. I think that would be, on offense, the biggest question mark is, how much will Fresno State be able to get men open? That was a big struggle last year, getting receivers open to throw the ball to. But Josiah Freeman, if healthy, I think can be an absolute rock star this year. And there's some young talent that's going to emerge. Mala'ulu, I think, is going to show even more than we've seen in the past. There's some freshmen with a lot of potential, a lot of talent. So that's going to be fun in fall camp to see which one of those guys emerge and who's ready to make a name for himself on September 5th at the Coliseum against the mighty Trojans.
Well, I'll tell you, Paul, we've talked about the fact that there's tremendous organizational continuity with Matt Entz. It seems like he's been here for 20 years, the way the organization runs, and it was exemplified over the weekend. They really know what they're doing. That has to do with the success, obviously, and experience Matt has had at previous stops, including national championship stops. But beyond that, the fact that the defense was so strong last year, and I know you lose certain guys, but it appears to me that as long as this team does not turn the ball over a lot, they are going to stay in games because this defense, it looks to me to be as solid as last year. Is that too optimistic, or is that fairly accurate in your point of view?
No, I think that's 100% accurate, and that's what I think should give fans the most hope. You have, a defense that was one of the best in the country last year. That you have that whole defensive staff from a coaching standpoint back. You have players that are more accustomed to the system and should be able to hit the ground running. And you address some needs through the transfer portal, particularly with regard to the pass rush up front. You get Martin Owusu back, who was kind of an unsung hero for the team last year, plugging up holes on that defensive line. Kavion Thunderbird also, was injured last year like Martin was, and he's back healthy. And he's a playmaker. I think, Kajabi grew up a lot. Logan Stute grew up a lot and is ready to help this team. And the guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the secondary this year is Keontre Harris, homegrown talent out of Lemoore, who's added 15 pounds of muscle, was being coached up by a guy who sent so many people to the NFL, and J.D. Williams. I think this is a defense that's going to play with a lot of swagger in 2026.
I'm so glad that Nick Benedetto is back. Paul, I had wondered because of the tremendous success. I know that he likes it here. I know it's a great place to raise a family, but looking at how this defense has played, I mean, Pat Hill always talked about you always have to be ready for your assistant coaches moving on to greater paydays. How big a relief is it that Nick is back, and how much do you look at this coaching staff and say that there is something that goes beyond just the paychecks here, the fact that people are right now, after a successful year, still here continuing with Fresno State, and I hope it lasts. Do you have the concern about it? Are you relegated to the inevitable? How are you viewing this?
Well, I think that's a multi-pronged answer there, but at the highest level, not to wax philosophical on you, I've found that the only way I can approach life is one day at a time. Each day has enough trouble of its own, and if I try to figure out next week and next month and next year and 10 years from now, all I'm doing is distracting myself from what's in front of me and what God's asked me to do today. And, it's great to plan for the future, and there are plenty of those. But Nick Benedetto is as sharp of a coach as you're going to find. And, he's someone, too, who lives his life a certain way based on his core values, and faith is at the center of that. And so I think when you have that, when you trust that somebody beyond yourself is directing your paths, you don't feel the pressure to have to do everything you could possibly do right now. You don't have to jump at a job because there's a dollar sign attached to it just because you have the opportunity now, worried that it's never going to come again. He knows who he is. He knows, everybody knows he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. He's proved it at every stop. He's going to have opportunities better than the ones that came this offseason.
And you said it, he's got a young family. He and his wife and their kids love it here. Does he have everything it takes to be a future head coach and a highly successful one? Absolutely, no question. But does he have to do that now? No. He loves his program. He loves these young men. And I would say, ultimately the story there, when you look across the board of retaining almost every coach on your staff and potentially even upgrading in a spot where you did lose somebody, is the culture that Matt Entz has built and the relational element of that culture. I think that's what the players talk about. That's what the coaches talk about. They feel seen. They feel valued. They feel supported. They feel like family. And that's reflected time after time in unsolicited comments by players and coaches. So I think there's something to it. And so, again, tip your cap to Coach Entz for making that a priority. And it's not an accident that people want to stick around when they feel like they're in a family where everybody loves and supports each other. So now let's take that same mentality, that same milieu, if you will, and project it onto our community. And let's get even more people engaged, more people pulling on the same end of the rope, and let's see what this program is possible in, an exciting year. The Pac-12, they're Bulldog fans who've dreamed their whole lives of having that Pac-12 name attached to Fresno State sports. And whether it looks exactly like it looked in the past with the same membership or not, beyond that, it's an exciting time, and it's an opportunity. And I look forward to seeing what this team can do with that opportunity.
Well, you never say never. You're correct, Paul, about anything. And you're also correct that, you have to worry about what's directly in front of you because you don't worry about that. The rest of it is not going to work out well anyway. The old Bo Schembechler line when there's great success at Michigan. They'd asked him one time, did you ever dream about this when you were the head coach at Miami of Ohio? And he said, all I knew was when I was the head coach at Miami of Ohio, if I didn't win there, I wouldn't have a job. So, no, I didn't look anywhere beyond that, okay? I do know this, and it's a generalization, but it is true. A lot of the guys who have Midwestern roots really like it here. It doesn't mean they're going to stay if the paycheck isn't commensurate to what you can find somewhere else ultimately. But they have a certain comfort level that when they come here, they like the fact that L.A. and San Francisco are close, but they also like the fact that they are somewhat isolated in a pocket that is more like the Midwest, and then you throw in Yosemite and the easy access to the lakes and everything else. It makes it a nice place to be as long as there aren't things pulling at you in the way they did with Kalen DeBoer, because I have to ask you, Paul, Kalen's a terrific guy, but I didn't see the $87.5 million contract when he was coaching Fresno State. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that would not be a reality at Fresno State, clearly. And the timing of Kalen's rise, it's not just the money difference, it's the competitive opportunities. And when he left is right when this new era of college football was being ushered in. It's a game changer. The world that we knew in the past is gone, and it applies to every sport. And I sure hope that people nationally can do something about it, because otherwise the chasm between the power conferences and those on the outside looking in, it's just growing exponentially. And it's really robbing, I think, a lot of communities of something that they really, really value. And I think it's robbing the sport in general of some of the greatest stories. And you saw it with the NFL draft this year. What percentage of those draft picks were coming from schools outside the power conference? Very small, because the power conferences have already drafted them from the non-power conferences and paid them to come join them. So some of the things that people really identified with, really celebrated, really loved about college sports have been ripped away in this era with, what Brandon Bakke, who was here last week, pitching his new book, Lessons from the Bench. Great read if you have a chance to check it out. Former Bulldog basketball player. One of his takeaways in that book is defeating meism. In a world that makes it all about me instead of we, I think we end up losing. And you and I could pontificate about it all day. I think your audience is singing from the same hymnal on it. But what remains to be seen is what's going to be done about it long term. And whether schools like Fresno State, who so much of this community's identity has revolved around what the Bulldogs have done,
if that's something that this community is going to lose because of greed and consolidation of power in the college sports landscape, and I sure hope not.
Yeah, I'm right with you. The other thing I wanted to ask you about before we touch upon the baseball situation, which is fait accompli in a lot of ways. That's why it wasn't front and center at the start of the show today. What's happened now with Brendan Sorsby, and if people aren't familiar with Sorsby, who has been much traveled, highly sought after, and is at Texas Tech with that $4 billion pool that they have of resources there, now entering a gambling addiction program. And Paul, this is the thing that I have been concerned about. Always concerned about the bit player on a team, the guy at the end of the bench who's feeding information to somebody or whatever. But the real concern is when your stars are somehow compromised. And this is where college athletics ball has got to be extremely careful because, and I'm not saying that Sorsby, they said that his betting before was not on games he was playing, though he was at Indiana on the roster but was not playing at the time. This is where if someone gets into gambling trouble and they are a star player, a difference maker, that is when the powers that be in the underworld of gambling come to you and say, we need you to make right what you owe us, and that's when someone starts to throw a game. Paul, this is what, in legalizing gambling, everybody at the NC2A has to be deathly afraid of.
Yeah. I'm old school, Tony. I'm never going to be somebody who talks about betting lines. I don't look at them. I don't want to know about it. You know, I don't want to know about people trying to influence the outcomes of games because that, again, it ruins the reason we all pay attention to it. Maybe not we all. I know there are a lot of your listeners who do engage in the gambling and enjoy it, but it's just never been what draws me to sports. And it's really a shame if it has the potential to ruin lives and if, you know, putting a whole bunch of money in the hands of young people who, you know, may not have the best guideposts or mentors in their life to steer clear away from things, it can pour gas on a fire that can have devastating effects, you know, and we saw a smaller taste of that here at Fresno State that, you know, none of us really wants to talk about, but it was just unfortunate. And the reality is it doesn't really matter whether you're betting on the games you're playing in or not. Once you get busted for gambling, you know, you're not going to straighten people out, not going to get them to believe it was this or that. Whatever gets thrown at you kind of sticks in the general public, and you can't erase that stigma. So it's, you know, I think even with the situation with players at Fresno State, there are a lot of things out there that aren't true, but you're never going to convince the majority of the population that they're not true. Once it's out there, it's out there. And, yeah, you've heard the term that Pandora's box has been opened with regard to a lot of things in college sports the last few years. And I think we're seeing that you really can't stuff it back in the box.
Yeah, it's the case. And as we've talked over and over again, when people say, well, it was going on anywhere or anyway, or paying players was going, yeah, but it was illegal. The problem is when you legitimize it, that's when that underbelly, that too soft underbelly shows up, and that's where people that are manipulating lines, people that are manipulating games are able to go to players who are the difference makers and say, you owe us X number of dollars because of betting in areas that have nothing to do with your sport, but the way you're going to make it right is by manipulating what you can control. And that's where when people say, well, he didn't bet on his sport. Well, it doesn't matter. If he's in big time over his head, anybody, the first thing they're going to do to resolve it is to tell you that the thing you can control, you're going to control. Otherwise, you're going to have some big problems with us. And I don't need to tell you physically what can happen to individuals who get in trouble with that particular element of our society. So I'm not saying with Sorsby it's going to come to that. I'm saying when you talk about a guy who's highly sought after, who can be a star, and who is now very vulnerable because of his own gambling addiction, so he's going into a program about it, you are really begging for trouble. And, yeah, I'm with you, and I hope from the very top on down that people find a way to not turn this into the toy department, because it is a real-world problem, and not to dismiss it and say there are other worries in life, so we're not going to worry about what's going on in the NC2A. It is important to a lot of people. We'll see how it plays out. All right, Paul, I want to ask you about the baseball program. You know, I tossed in the towel a couple of weeks ago as far as this season goes, but beyond that, the two things that we keep talking about on this show. One, the Bill Walsh line about Steve DeBerg. He played just well enough to get you beat. That means you're not getting blown out. It means there's always a play or two that goes the wrong way that turns victory into defeat, and the Bulldog baseball team has specialized in that, unfortunately, throughout a lot of the year. The other thing was Tony Cavilla's line at Fresno City College a long time ago when they lost a game that was critically important earlier in the year. They're not going to cancel the rest of the season, so we have to keep playing. Paul, those two things apply to Fresno State baseball right now. They have been their own worst enemy many times in games they should have won. Nothing they can do about it now. But going forward, Paul, they're not going to cancel the rest of the year. It's highly unlikely that they're going to make the postseason. You and I both know that. I know you've already referenced it on air. I talked about it a few weeks ago. What do they do from here on to make this a better finish that leads to a better 2027 on the field itself?
Yeah, you know, that was a question I posed to Steve Hosey in our post-game show yesterday, more from a mindset perspective. Because you're right, they haven't been getting blown out. They've been in games. They've been in position to win games, all three games this weekend against a team that, you know, to be frank, is more talented, more experienced. San Diego State brought in 14 power conference transfers, not just Division I transfers, power conference transfers, 14 of them to this year's team with a new head coach who was an assistant on a College World Series team a year ago. And that team's really starting to gel. It's won 7 straight. But the Bulldogs had the Aztecs on the ropes Friday night, right? They end up losing in 11 innings, 4-3. They've got a 5-3 lead going to the 6th on Saturday, and they walked the first 2 guys. Yesterday, another game. They've got an early lead. They're tied going into the last 3 innings, and they end up losing 6-2. It is a familiar pattern playing out over and over again. And can some of it be attributed to their youth and the injuries? Again, I mean, they played the last 2 games without their best hitter, Griffin Sotomayor, who's missed some time before. They're down about 6 guys, you know, who are out for the year. But there are no excuses. They've had winning opportunities and haven't gotten it done. And, you know, when they do this piece of the puzzle, they don't do that piece of the puzzle. And in a way, I think it's more maddening than if they would be getting blown out every day. But it's also a growth opportunity. And it's calibrating their sense of what each one of them needs to do, how each one of them can get better. And I think, you know, with regard to the big picture, the most hopeful parallel is to look at the number 1 team in the country, UCLA. And by the way, congrats to Sac State for being just the 4th team all year to beat UCLA on Sunday. Matt and Brenda Entz were there to celebrate with their son Connor, who's part of that Hornet team, and they beat the Bruins at Jackie Robinson Stadium yesterday. So that was big for Sac State, who the Bulldogs are 2-0 against this year, in case you're wondering. But UCLA 2 years ago, I think I've mentioned this before on your show, won 19 games. They went 19-33 for a Hall of Fame coach, John Savage, who said, you know, I'm going to take my lumps this year playing this group of freshmen and hope I can keep them together. And he has kept them together. And now they're not just number 1 in the country. They're an unquestioned number 1 in the country that hasn't lost a conference game all year and is 39-4. I'm not saying Fresno State's going to do that 2 years from now, but if the Dogs can keep this group of freshmen together, there's potential to be a real powerhouse in what's going to be a very challenging baseball conference next year. I don't have to tell your listeners what a power Oregon State has been in college baseball this century. They may not know, you know, that Dallas Baptist has made a dozen regionals in a row, that Texas State right now looks like an at-large team for the NCAA tournament. Not to mention Gonzaga, who's had some power in the past, and San Diego State, who's making strides, really invested in the program in the offseason and is seeing the dividends now. They may win the league. So if Fresno State can keep that group of freshmen together and add a little bit of experience in the key spots, there's potential to be really strong the next couple of years. But what you'd really like, when you see these guys up close every day, when you see how hard they're working, when you see how the losing is weighing on them emotionally, you sure would love to see them get a little satisfaction before this year's over. And that may start to build that bridge to next season. They'll go out and play summer ball. You got some guys rehabbing from injuries, trying to get healthy. But with what they have left in this season, 12 games, they still have something to play for. And here's another one. If they need a little extra motivation, they need to go 7-5 to avoid setting a new school record for losses in a season. Bob Bennett had a year in 1975 when they lost 33 games. Mike Batesville did, and Aaron Judge's last year lost 33 games. No Bulldog teams ever lost more than 33 games. So if they can win 7 of their last 12, they'll avoid that dubious distinction that none of them wants to be a part of. And they're certainly capable. The teams they're playing are not at the top of the conference. The best team that they have left is the team they'll go play on the road in Pullman this weekend in Washington State. And let's see how they go up there and compete. And even this Wednesday game at CSUN. When you have 12 wins all year, any win is meaningful. But they're just looking for momentum. And one of the good things we saw this weekend was some freshman pitchers who continue to get better and better and better. Eric Rico pitched into the 7th inning yesterday and pitched great. Brandon Thomas this weekend, threw almost 100 pitches, and he was dominant and put up 0 after 0 after 0. So those are guys that, as sophomores next year, can have even bigger roles. And I think that's going to be the key real indicator. Some people say, well, if they lost so many games this year, why do you want the same guys back? Well, those guys are getting valuable experience. When they're sophomores and the consistency is greater than what it is this year, that can be the difference between these close losses and close wins or even some blowout wins. And you're also no longer going to have the skewing statistically and emotionally of these crazy altitude environments that, as we've seen with team after team, can have a lingering effect when you leave Albuquerque or when you leave Colorado Springs. By the way, Air Force still hasn't lost a home game all year, the only team in the country that hasn't been beaten at home. And the Bulldogs are up 11-5 going to the 8th there. And didn't get it done. So you're not going to have that element in the new conference of these crazy altitude parks that can not only change the result on a given day, but linger in your mind, especially for pitchers moving forward. So it's got to be more like traditional baseball in the new league, and more like the historical leagues Fresno State has been in. And I think that's another exciting wrinkle that we probably haven't talked about enough.
Paul, one thing about this team, and this is where you are uniquely qualified to pass judgment on this, because from a media standpoint, you're the only one that's with this team consistently on the road. Losing can wear you down. We all know that. I've talked many times about when Teddy came in to be the head coach, and we just mentioned this the other day, as a matter of fact, and he decided that at the end of the 2016 season, though he was named coach with a couple of games to go in the season itself on Veterans Day, he was named coach, that he said, I'm just going to sit in the stands and I'm going to let this play out, and then I'll pass judgment when we get to the off season. And when I talked to him after spring ball, I said, did you see more talent than you thought? And he said, yes, I did. Of course, that was a precursor to a very pronounced comeback that started in 2017. And I said, well, what do you think the biggest factor was? He said, I think the losing just wore them down, that a lot of the guys, that their physical approach to the game was affected by the losing. Paul, has the losing affected this team? Has the attitude been affected at all from the guys that you are around on the day-to-day basis?
Well, I think it has to have some effect, right? I mean, anybody who's gone through adversity and gone through repeated adversity knows that it can wear you down. And this is where, I sat through their chapel service yesterday with Steve Hosey, who was encouraging them to be there for each other, to pick each other up, to really love each other. And sometimes, situations like this that are not what you planned on, not what you expected, not what you'd ever asked for, they take you deeper, and they open up things in you that maybe wouldn't have been unlocked if you didn't go through it. And so I think that's the hope. And some guys, I think, are really growing as a result. If Fresno State had been healthy, if they had their senior shortstop, their number one pitcher, their first baseman, the should I keep going on while the guys are hurt? No. But if they had all those guys, some of these freshmen would have a third of the at-bats they have right now. So their growth trajectory has accelerated, and that's going to make them better in 2027 as a result. And, you know, each one of those guys has to look himself in the mirror and say, okay, how am I going to take this really frustrating and painful experience and allow it to work for good in my life? And I see that process happening. I see a lot of resilience. I see a lot of optimism. And, you know, I think the other piece of that is coaches. And, you know, Mike Batesel, the last great team that he had, that 2019 squad that was maybe a couple calls away from going to the Super Regional, that Stanford Regional in 2019, that team really became who it was out of some trying years earlier in his tenure. He had a pretty good run there. You know, the 2016 team that won the regular season title didn't get a bid. But moving on from there was almost a different mentality in that program. He had made some adjustments after that year with Aaron Judge as a junior when they went 23 and 33. And how did that happen? And he changed some things. And I think that's an opportunity, too. You've got a really young head coach in Ryan Overland who the last 2 years, you know, has kept that team focused on the prize and been able to navigate through all kinds of challenges. That team last year had so many devastating injuries, but look what they did at the end of the year. They got it done again. It doesn't look like that's going to happen this year, but that may be something that takes him back to the drawing board and looking at what adjustments he can make and how that staff, which, you know, has a lot of great guys on it who really know the game, how they can do what they do better and differently next year to make sure that a season like this never happens again. So I think it's everyone involved in the program. And that's, you know, you need your administrative support too. You know, they've been blessed the last few years to have a guy in Mike Wickham in the athletic department who had spent 20 years in Major League Baseball, who brought some innovations to the program, like the TrackMan system, which has helped them in scouting and player development. And he's no longer with the school, and I think that's tough, right? And that position hasn't been filled yet, but you have other people in that administration who are trying to encourage Coach Overland, be a listening ear for him. There are people in the dugout club, the alumni. I think that's why we're going to see this program bounce back, is there are too many people in our community that care about Fresno State baseball to allow a season like this to ever happen again. So I'm looking forward to the future, but I also want to see how these guys navigate these last 12 games, how much pride and passion and resilience they put on display. Because I haven't seen a single player hang his head or throw in the towel, and that's saying something with all the really disappointing and frustrating losses they've absorbed.
Well, again, they're up in Palouse this weekend, so we'll see what happens. Paul, safe travels. Appreciate it, my friend. I'll certainly be in touch. Take care.
Thanks for always spreading the word, Tony, and thanks again for banging the drum for Honor Flight. We had so many awesome people there to celebrate the veterans, including 3 of those Bulldog baseball players who came out and shook the hand of every vet. And we're all in this together. We live in a special place filled with special people, and you're one of them. So thanks for spreading the word.
Look forward to the next one, that's for sure. It's always a great treat anytime Honor Flight is there, and I know you guys had just an absolutely terrific and very meaningful time back in D.C. Take care, my friend. I'll see you.
Adios.
All right, guys, Paul Leffler, take a break, come back, type of schedule, hand it off to Billy. Has the full 3 hours today. Again, you can give him a call on the Lee's Air Hotline. Mark it down, 559-320-1430. Take a break. Back with more after this as the Bulldog Hour continues on this Monday on Central Valley Sports Leader, 1430 ESPN.
At Helena Agri Enterprises, we're committed to helping you make the best agronomic decisions for your farm. That's why we combine cutting-edge technology with superior products. Helena's Agri-Intelligence program uses in-depth analysis to identify potential problems in the field before they take root. Combined with a complete line of high-quality crop production and crop protection inputs, Helena has the tools to help you increase productivity, enhance performance, and maximize your return on investment. Contact your local Helena representative or authorized dealer to create the right plan for your farm with Helena products and Agri-Intelligence.
Introducing Callaway's latest innovation in golfing technology, the Paradigm drivers and irons. Increase speed and power on every swing. Engineered for maximum distance and accuracy. Callaway Paradigm drivers and irons are a game changer for golfers at all levels. See for yourself. Put one in your hands at Roger Dunn. Swing it. Feel it. Take your game to the next level with Callaway's Paradigm drivers and irons. Your number one at Roger Dunn.
Attention Central Valley. Fashion furniture buyers are headed to the High Point Furniture Market to bring in new styles and what's next, which means it's time to reset the floor. Save up to 50% on clearance, closeouts, overstocks, and one-of-a-kind items. When they're gone, they're gone. No restocks. Plus, special financing is available. It's the Reset the Floor sale happening now, only at Fashion Furniture. There's nothing like it in all of California.
Citizens Business Bank is a proud sponsor of the Fresno State Bulldogs. Hi, I'm Susan
tie this series last night into a 3-0 deficit, and I think people that follow the NBA know that nobody has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit to win a 7-game series. We'll see what happens when the Lakers play the Rockets on Wednesday. So for us, we pay close attention to the Giants, the A's. We know that we've got the World Series coming up and everything in the playoffs, no matter who's involved through ESPN Radio. The same applies to the NBA. Even if the Lakers aren't there, we'll have the NBA playoffs and finals for you on ESPN Radio. And, of course, Westwood One will bring you all the NFL in addition to our local teams, the 49ers, who, by the way, need to explain what in the world they were doing with the draft. The idea of the draft is to draft people lower than people think, not higher than people think. It's not merely how good they might be, it's where you can get them. Don't overspend in the way of draft choices with guys that are going to be there anyway. That's for you, Gino and Visalia. But we have the 49ers, of course, the Rams and the Raiders and everything through the Super Bowl from Westwood One. And as we mentioned, Fresno State coming up beginning in July. Want to, again, remind you about not only Phil's show, but Paul Menters with his 2 fine shows, all about Fresno Pacific Athletics over on 790 from 6 to 7 on Wednesdays, and also his fine and long-running show, Central Valley Sports Report, 10 a.m. to noon from First Swing Sports on 1430 on Saturday. We are with you 2 o'clock each and every weekday. You can reach me, TDAD1 at ATT.net, TD80, the number 1 at ATT.net. Everything for the station, 1430 ESPNFresno.com. You get the live links and podcasts there. Thanks again to Jorge. Thanks to Paul Lepler. Thanks to Ed Dunkel, Precision Civil Engineering, Joe Cruz, Superior Pipe and Stainless Supply, and our buddies at Lee's Air Plumbing and Heating. Again, mark down the Lee's Air hotline. Give Phil a call. He's up for 3 hours. 559-320-1430. See you tomorrow with Jackson Moore to talk more about the spring preview, and also, of course, Jack Furtick basketball on Wednesdays on KFIG Fresno.